And next, we are going to hear from Emma Cubitt and Graham Cubitt about Indwell and Invizij collaborative project. So Emma Cubitt is a principal of Invizij Architects. She specializes in housing, work with nonprofits, and sustainable design. And Graham Cubitt is the Director of Projects and Development with Indwell, a Hamilton, Ontario Christian charity that builds affordable and supportive housing communities. And Graham has overseen the development of over 500 homes with hundreds more in planning and construction. And so they're not sharing just one project, but rather several projects that are passive house, affordable, supportive developments. So I'm looking forward to this one too.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I just wanted to say that not only do we get to work on all these exciting projects together, but for the last year and a half, we've been working in the same house on these exciting projects with all our other teams. So it's been a unique experience. Graham, your mic's not working.
Thanks very much for having us share as part of this discussion. And really the topic of resiliency is obviously top of mind for many of us, both the housing crisis, which is impacting Canada in unprecedented ways with the pandemic, and also obviously the climate crisis and many other things that are happening. So hopefully some of what we can share from our experiences is useful for wherever you are. We are trying to share one slideshow. So I'm going to do the first 7 slides, and then I'll hand it over to Emma to talk about many of the architectural things, and then I'll wrap up with a few of the last slides. So thanks for bearing with the back and forth in this.
Graham, your camera's not working too.
My phone's not working.
Oh.
I should say my computer's not working. So I'm logged in with my phone to the audio and my camera to the. I see. Let me. If you can hear okay with me not using my headset, I'll just talk through the. Is that working? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sorry for the confusion there. My technology is intermittent on this computer, unfortunately, just with Zoom, ironically. So very quickly, if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. Indwell is a vision. Indwell's vision is hope and homes for all, and we were set up in the 1970s to provide a response to homelessness due to deinstitutionalization, which was a provincial policy at the time. People moving out of hospitals, psychiatric hospitals, long-term institutions, and then finding ways to really transform lives through affordable housing with supports. So our tenants pay affordable rents, and we deliver supports to them in their homes. We do have about 700 tenants right now in four communities, 4 municipalities in Ontario. And over the last number of years, we have become one of Canada's largest developers of affordable and supportive housing. And indeed, actually, probably Canada's largest developer of passive house standard multi-residential projects. So it's out of that past experience that we really have a vision for growth. The next slide is our mission. We're a Christian charity that creates affordable housing communities for people seeking health, wellness, and belonging. While we are from the Christian tradition, we're open to anyone to be a part of our organization as tenants or otherwise. And so we're really focused on common values of sharing dignity, love, and hope. And we see that each of those is expressed in different ways for each of our tenants as we come alongside them. The next slide is a very quick infographic of the difference that affordability makes. When a tenant has a fixed income in Ontario, if you're on a disability, it's around $1,150. If that has to be stretched to cover just rent, which is now over $1,000 is the cost of renting a 1-bedroom apartment in most of our communities, you have nothing left for the rest of life. If you can shrink the amount that's cost in rent, then you can actually afford the rest of what you need on a day-to-day basis with a much higher level of resilience. This is the basic economic paradigm that we work with to try to offer affordable housing by cutting down the rent costs for tenants. Utilities obviously are a big factor in a lot of rental situations, and so Passive House was attractive to us in terms of that angle of minimizing utility costs. The next slide is the next two slides are really some of our past experience that got us to where we made the decision to choose Passive House. We'd already been developing new housing. We'd already been choosing to design towards high energy efficiency standards. The picture on the top right was a retrofit building that was 40% better than the Model National Energy Code for buildings. The one on the left was the new construction, and we were trying to do our best on that. The bottom one was a retrofit of an old church hall. And again, trying to take high performance standards, but really recognizing that we were doing our best without a real end goal of a unit per units of energy per square meter or any kind of target like that. So the next slide is a couple other examples. A big part of what we've done is adaptive reuse and renovations or conversions. And so whether it's an old knitting mill factory or old bars and rooming houses, trying to take these buildings and bring them from something which was maybe completely uninhabited, the factory for 20 years, or inhabited but extremely derelict, like the rooming house on the right, trying to bring those buildings into circulation again. And it maybe provides an example for communities across the country for how to utilize old infrastructure in a new way. The one on the right is our first Passive House project as well, using Enerfit. So the next slide, and I'll hand it over to Emma after this one, is that we weren't starting from scratch when it came to designing buildings or working towards energy efficiency, but we realized that with that little graph on the right, many of our buildings were doing pretty good or reasonably good, but in order to dramatically reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and dramatically reduce our energy needs, we needed to find a different way of designing buildings, which was why we picked pursued different options and settled on Passive House. And then, of course, the 5 key principles of Passive House became the areas where we focused a lot of our relearning and team development. So I'll hand it over to Emma there to walk through how each of those became expressed in a number of our projects recently.
Great. So you can go to the next slide. So while Indwell had made this commitment in 2016 to Passive House, it was new to the Hamilton community, to us as designers, and to pretty much anyone we've talked to. And now, over the last few years, we've been able to kind of build on that initial commitment to Passive House and try to integrate that into all of our projects, really, that we do together with Indwell, as well as some of the other affordable housing providers in Hamilton. Similarly, City Housing Hamilton made a similar commitment to Passive House, and I've had several other clients working in the nonprofit world that have all made the same commitment. Kind of around the same time, there's been programs that the CMHC and federal government have created, which are now supporting these projects even more so that we can build more of them. So that's been really exciting to be kind of a part of that wave of the funding that's been possible. So I think I'll show a few projects that we've worked on, but we've built right now about 200 units and of Passive House over multiple projects. And we have 200 more under construction, and a few hundred more that are in the different design phases. And they range through all different towns and cities across Southern Ontario. So one of the first things that we learned right away was the importance of thermal bridging. So this is showing some of the different techniques that we've used to resolve that. And I heard one of the projects using the long screw method. For us, we on some of the projects, we've been able to get away with just 3 inches of insulation on the outside and 2x6 insulation on the inside, and then using the long screw method. I heard much thicker requirements in more northern communities, which would be really interesting and I'm sure challenging in different ways too. Go to the next slide. Here's just a few more examples of the different types of detailing we do, from the having the exterior waterproofing that would be continuous underneath the footings, and actually, so that's been one of the learnings we've had, is going from where we had raft slabs and continuous insulation all the way around, or where we had footings and insulating around, to doing modeling on each condition to make sure that there was actually value to put into that kind of detailing. So I think as we've gone through each project, we've learned which things are the most important in terms of investing the materials and labor and ultimately the money into for that project, and which ones are not as important overall. All right, next slide. Yeah, so similarly, these are just more of the detailings of different projects, how we kind of build up from the foundation. Gosh, it takes a long time to get out of the ground with these projects. I think that's typical, but even more with the type of detailing that we have on the Passive House projects. But once we're out of the ground, then we know we can just kind of blitz through with the structure. Next. Here's a few of the different projects we've worked on. They've ranged from buildings that are mixed use and concrete and steel. Was our second project at 500 James Street in North Hamilton. And we've moved to having a few projects after that were wood construction, as we were trying to use the carbon capture of the wood. Then we did one project that was with the Build Smart system, which is prefab wood panels made in Kansas that are Passive House certified and were shipped to site. For the last few projects, because of the site conditions or because of the different uses that are in the building, we've moved back to doing core slab and a steel system called Delta Beam that can reduce our floor-to-floor heights, especially when we have all the ducts going through the corridors. And we've kind of created this hybrid where we have the wood and steel structure and then wood on the outside with insulation between the studs and then more insulation on the exterior. That's kind of been our most common go-to for projects recently. Next. Some of those pictures in the last slide, you could see the different thermal breaks that we're using. We've learned to try to simplify the structure as much as we can in terms of how just simplifying the form so that we don't have to use as much of the thermal breaks as we try to make this something that could be more replicable. However, we actually have our first project under construction right now, which is a parking garage. And for that, we have the unconditioned space below and above it, the residential part. So we have like a regular parking garage of structure with the concrete columns, and then right above it, these armatherms that are 2 inches thick. And then that's the break that we need for creating our thermally broken envelope above. So next slide. We have a lot of pictures of examples. Graham created these slides and just put them all in there. Yeah, gosh, I don't even know. So you can just see some of these examples of typical details we've done. We initially had started by doing exterior fiberglass angles to support the windows so that they were within the insulation layer on the exterior. And then we were rolling tape and other membranes all around those fiberglass angles and tying it to the outside. It was very labor intensive, but we at the time thought that was the best thing. Since then, we've moved on to do interior taping of all the windows. So you can see that example on the left. It's actually a beautiful Veta window, and yeah, just taped onto the inside. So that's what we've done going forward. Yeah, don't know what to say about the rest of these. Maybe the next slide. Actually, one of the pictures in the past slide was about on the bottom right, I think, is about the phase where we'll do compartmentalization testing in a range of apartments, and the reason for that being that we've done a mixture of PHI certified projects as well as FIAS, and with the FIAS projects, having compartmentalization testing is an important part of the process. So actually that's been a really useful thing for our contractors and trades to learn, is how to air seal to the extent that we would like them to between units. So because we're not only dealing with kind of the air balancing characteristics, but also we're dealing with things like viruses that we never dealt with before, or bed bugs, or just smells through apartments, and realizing the value of doing proper air sealing is something that will definitely continue on all projects going forward. All right, next slide. I saw somebody had put up a question about AeroSeal. Oh, Graham answered. Okay, but this is the first project that we're looking at doing it at, which is an old church, which we're going to convert into, I think it's around 40 apartments. But the sanctuary space is going to remain just as it is, as a community space and gathering space for tenants and other people in the community. And in order to maintain the historical integrity of that space, but still improve it as much as we can within the realm of maintaining what's there, we're looking at using the AeroSeal for that. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so these are kind of more examples as we're moving up into the insulation, exterior insulation of the building. We've used different methods of doing that. On some of our first projects, we were using HFO spray foam and clips to secure the cladding. On more recent projects, we've actually, the project on the top left and top right is using green girts, which are like a girt product that's made out of fiberglass, comes from Michigan. Those were really great to work with once we got them here. The picture in the middle is the Build Smart wall system, which is a complete wall panel that includes the stud structure, the insulation, zip board on the outside, and the windows are already installed and air sealed together. That was for our project in Woodstock, Ontario, called Blossom Park, which passed the air tightness testing. We were worried how it would work, but they've had much success in the States as well with that product. Next. Moving on.
I did a different project, so feel free to zip through the memo.
Sorry. Graham, is my sound not working?
It's back now, Emma.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. Another one of the typical details we have is doing the over insulation on the inside of the windows. But as we've worked on multiple projects, now we have a collection of details of how to do the air sealing around windows and different junctures. And so it's made it much easier for us as a firm to be able to replicate this kind of detailing project by project. And we just change a few of the different special characteristics on a project, but we get to repeat these details and refine them as we go on. Next slide. Graham, do you want to talk about windows?
Sure, the windows. The windows are an example of where we've done a lot of research about local companies and finally found some companies that are offering windows that are available to Passive House standards made here in Ontario or in Canada. For the first number of projects, we brought windows from other countries in Europe, and it was not easy to work across like multiple time zones, multiple countries, shipping, etc. And also warranty service has been a disaster for some of those products. And so we're happy that we're now able to find products available locally. Next slide. In terms of the HVAC, we've been able to use different techniques and different approaches on different projects. What we've realized though is that heat pumps are key, obviously, to cutting our GHGs and finding that energy efficiency, but it's super easy to overheat buildings. And so you can see that top left picture, we have boilers and a hydronic system, which was way too much for that building. And the challenge is that we don't have enough cooling capacity in the winter for all of the tenants. And so it's not enough cooling capacity. The combination of heating and cooling through the VRFs is a challenge. So we're actually on our next project moving from fully centralized ventilation to a decentralized system per unit. The next slide. Some IR photos of some of the heating. This is in a Passive House building. You can see just the amount of heat coming off of hot water storage tanks or different kinds of pipes. Just the hidden places where you never think about the heat that gets lost in a conventional building suddenly becomes it really matters in these Passive House buildings. The next slide. So the final few slides, we'll just fly through some examples of the projects we've just opened. In 2022, we opened this one, North End Landing, 45 apartments over top of a new church. It's Canada's largest mixed use project. And we're pursuing Passive House International certification. The next slide is McQueston Lofts. We just got certified on this project with FIAS in 2021. It's 50 apartments in a Hamilton Public Library branch on the ground floor. It's really a beautiful building, and we lived in that building ourselves for a little bit of time when the tenant community was moving in. The next slide is actually on that last one. It's also a partnership with the Indigenous Dedwo-Dedesne Aboriginal Health Center and Native Women's Center, and 30% of the tenants in that building are Indigenous tenants. In this slide, it's 34 apartments to PHI. We're just pending certification. We think it should come through shortly. It's been a long process that hasn't gone smoothly on the certification, and the learning curve on this project in terms of merging different technologies and such was a challenge. The contractor also overstated their expertise, but they were willing to actually pursue finishing the project, and we were able to get to the end goal of cutting the ribbon together, which was good. The next slide is a project that's under construction, 72 apartments, a mixed use. It's got a commercial restaurant in it, offices, and 2 retail spaces. So that one's quite a complex building. It's probably our most expensive per square foot right now. But I think that's due to the complexity rather than the size or the passive houseness, or I should say merging those 3 different things together. That's in London, Ontario. The next one, I think might be the final slide. We have a consensus that there's a housing problem. We have consensus that, well, not necessarily consensus, but we know that there's a climate crisis. How do we make passive house construction broadly applicable? We know that it's feasible. Now the challenge is how to inspire the construction industry really to realize that resiliency matters, and we can achieve success in a lot of these fronts by actually just putting our minds to and our willingness to change how we do things in simple, straightforward ways with materials that are readily available. So how can we, to paraphrase Gandhi, lead the change we want to see? So that's the end of our slides. I think the next one just has our contact details on it. So thank you.